let's get into our first cultural hero. You know, the young Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, the greatest.
Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
The greatest.
Muhammad Ali.
So what you got to say about your boy?
Man, you know, to me, Muhammad Ali is a cultural hero due to the time period that he decided to do what he did in the 60s.
Okay.
It was a tumultuous time for the black community. You had, you know, the civil rights movement, you know, integration. You had the Vietnam War, which the black community felt very strongly about. Mm-hmm. You know, so it was a very, very tough time for our people during that moment. And Muhammad Ali, I would say, sat at the top of the pyramid when it comes to a celebrity that impacted a community, a culture, and ultimately the world.
110%. Yeah.
So Cassius Clay, man. So a brief story from what I know, that he had an experience that kind of changed him. Obviously, the most controversial thing is, you know, his name was Cassius Clay. He made the personal choice to join Islam and follow the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, and he changed his name to Muhammad Ali. From him being a sports superhero, the greatest of all time, he converted to Islam, and that was very controversial. You know, at that time and even up to today, there's a lot of negative stereotypes and connotations to the Nation of Islam,
right,
just in that whole belief system. So when he decided to, you know, put himself into that, he automatically became one of the most polarizing athletes of that time.
Right.
The one thing that stood out to me about his story was when he won the Olympic gold medal. You know, champ of the world, you got that big, nice gold medal on your chest, and he goes back to his hometown. And he's like, you know what, I'm going to go eat downtown. I think this was in Kentucky. And at that time, black people weren't allowed to eat downtown. So, but in Muhammad Ali's mind, I'm the champ of the world.
Right.
I have the U.S. Olympic gold medal on my chest. So I'm going to go downtown and I'm going to get me some food.
Right.
So he goes downtown, and the lady server says, we don't serve Negroes, you know? So in Ali's mind, he goes, what do you mean?
I'm the champ.
I'm the champion of the world.
Right.
Like, you can't serve me? So it's kind of like, you know, he had kind of like a complex.
Right, but you're still a Negro.
But that woman let him know, you're still a Negro.
Right.
I don't care how special you think you are.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, in Ali's perspective, you know, he's from that neighborhood. He went to church in that neighborhood. His daddy fought in wars for the country, and he can't even go eat in his hometown. He can't even go get a sandwich, you know? So that kind of, to me, changed his mindset on how he wanted to be vocal about the oppression that happens in everyday lives of black people in America.
Right. And he grew to be one of probably the most, like you said, polarizing and most vocal. And back to, you know, the definition of a cultural hero, he stood on what he believed in, and, you know, he stood on his morals. And when he was drafted to go to the Vietnam War, and he was drafted for, you know, the armed forces, you know, he stood on his Muslim faith and said, we don't believe in the war. He's like, I'm not going to y'all war. And I watched an interview with him, and what I felt, you know, was very powerful. One of the things he said, my conscience won't let me shoot my brother or some poor, hungry people in the mud for big, powerful America. For what? They ain't never called me no nigger. And I felt him on that, because it was like, you want me to go and fight in this war for this big country. You want me to, you know, go and, you know, kill and murder and shoot and oppress these people in these other countries, these, you know, poor people. For what? I'm not even respected in my own country. I'm treated like less than. So he stood on that, and he said, I'm not going. I'm not doing it.
Right.
So they threatened him with 5 years in jail.
Yeah, 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. And the interesting part about that, he did many interviews, expressing his thoughts on the Vietnam War. Like you said, he said, "No Viet Cong is my enemy."
Right.
He
Right.
looked straight at the man that was interviewing and said, "You're my enemy.
Right.
You're my oppressor."
Right.
So to even be bold enough to say that in the media in the 60s, knowing the position he holds as being a black Muslim athlete, and he was still bold and courageous enough to tell this man into his face that he was the oppressor, that he was the devil. So that just goes to show you how much he believed in what he believed in.
Right. And what I found interesting as well is he was being drafted to the armed forces, but I guess one of the boxing promoters, was it Bob Arum?
Bob Arum.
Arum. He drafted a deal to where he wasn't actually going to fight like as a soldier. He was going to go to the different, I guess, army bases and
Do boxing
fight
exhibitions.
and do boxing exhibitions. So that was one of the deals they drafted up, but Muhammad Ali didn't even want to do that. He wanted no part of the armed forces and the war.
Right.
So he's like, put me in jail, lock me up, fine me, take away my career. I want no parts. I'm standing on what I believe in. I'm standing in my Muslim faith, but I'm not rolling.
Right.
I'm not
And the
going
interesting
with
part that you think about that, they wanted to use Ali as kind of like a spectacle and a draw to make black men go into the service.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have Ali sitting there boxing in front of, all the military, and they're going to record it and they're going to put it out, and Ali, backs blacks to go to the war, and they're going to blast it out to encourage black people to go. So he's like, you're not going to use my celebrity to encourage people to go, and most of them feel like me.
Right.
So I'm definitely going to stand behind my people.
Right. And it's interesting you say that because I was reading an article, and one of the articles said, what if everyone had this mentality? What if everyone kind of denounced the being drafted and going into the war? That would kind of stop and end the war in its tracks. So it was almost like he was way ahead of his time, and he was onto something in regards to you kind of ending wars. If everyone had that same mentality of, I'm not going to another country to kill and oppress and beat innocent people. If everyone had that mentality, then maybe there'd be no wars.
That's very true, but you would think on the flip side, if, say, all black people denounced the war, black people would then they'd be demonized in the media.
Sure.
We would be looked at as anti-American, even more so than they already think we are.
For sure. And that's another layer to it, because another big controversy was the Cleveland Summit. So when Muhammad Ali met up with Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, met up with Jim Brown, and met up with other members of the Nation of Islam, they initially came together to convince Muhammad Ali to kind of quiet his voice and just
back off his stance.
Yeah, just back off his stance and go, do his exhibition fights and just do what the government essentially was telling him to do. And in that infamous meeting of all of these well-renowned athletes and celebrities that were there to literally convince Muhammad Ali that he was crazy and that he should back down from the government and he should just go into the army, he literally convinced them otherwise. He was so passionate and rooted in his faith, and he believed that he just didn't believe in the war, where he was able to convince them that it was a bad idea, and essentially that he just wasn't having it and he wasn't going for it. And I remember in an article that Sports Illustrated did on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I'll read it. The quote says, "He has something I've never been able to attain, and something very few people I know possesses. He has an absolute and sincere faith. I'm not worried about Muhammad Ali. He is better equipped than anyone I know to withstand the trials in store for him. What I'm worried about is the rest of us.
That's powerful.
That was very powerful. That was very powerful. And I saw another interview with Muhammad Ali, and the interviewer was kind of asking him, like, you know, you're putting it all on the line. You're the world, you know, heavyweight champion of boxing. You're putting your freedom on the line. You're putting your career on the line, but you're putting your freedom on the line. Like, you can go to jail for up to 5 years. And what he said, which I felt was extremely powerful. He said it's kind of hard to put any black person in jail because if you ask the average black person, we are already in jail. We have been for 400 years. And he also said, no people can gain their freedom until some have to die, and some lose wealth, and some give up money. So he understood that in order to advance our people and get one more step or inch closer to freedom, someone has to sacrifice their livelihood. Someone has to sacrifice their wealth. Someone has to sacrifice their life. And his point was, people do it every day. The people signing up and being drafted into the war, there is sacrificing their life. So why not sacrifice mine for my people?
Right. And a person in his position most likely wouldn't sacrifice anything.
Right.
If I'm in a position, you know, back in the day, I'm in the 60s and I'm a millionaire. I have these companies, businesses. I'm doing my thing. I'm not even considered black. I'm just considered Muhammad Ali.
Right.
He was willing to give up everything. His freedom, his titles, his notoriety, his popularity, everything, because he believed in his faith and he backed his people. Now, if that's not a hero, I don't know what is.
That's definitely a hero. So rest in peace, Muhammad Ali, the greatest.
The GOAT.
He died from Parkinson's disease. Before he had passed, he was very involved with Parkinson's disease and the Special Olympics and things of that nature. So we salute you, man. You were one of the pioneers in regards to standing for the black community. So we love you, R.I.P. And yeah, man. Yeah. And what's funny is now he's such a revered figure now. Everyone loves Muhammad Ali. There's posters and artwork of Muhammad Ali everywhere. Books, movies.
Everything.
But back in that time, in that moment when he was resisting the draft, he was hated.
Right.
He was hated.
So you think about it. What athlete today is on the same parallel line as Muhammad Ali?
Let me think about that. Colin Kaepernick. Young Cat, man. Young Cat put his career on the line as well, for his people, man.
Yeah.
For his people.
And the interesting thing is, all he did was take a knee.
Yes, it was a silent protest.
A silent protest. To which he asked military men if it was disrespectful to the anthem if he were to kneel during it. They told him, no, it is not disrespectful because you do have the right to free speech. And there's no other way to really be disrespectful towards it, because at the end of the day, it's not like, you know, he turned his back to the flag.
Right.
He didn't, you know.
I think he might have, I could be wrong, but I think he even went to someone and said, how can I protest and take a stance? And they kind of gave him that advice. And they said, this is why we fight for our country and our people, so that you have the freedoms and the rights to take a stance on what you believe in.
Right.
So, and that's what he did. He took a stance during the national anthems being played before the NFL games, and he just took a knee, man. He said, I'm not going to stand and essentially pledge my allegiance and loyalty to a country that
is okay with
the killing of black people
on camera.
and the injustices of black people. He's like, I'm not going to stand for it. So you know what I'm going to do? While all y'all are standing, I'm just going to take a knee. Never mind me. Don't mind me. I'm just going to be over here in the corner, minding my business, not saying a word. I'm going to just take a knee.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, people had, they were in an uproar. They had a problem with that. They felt like he was disrespecting the flag, disrespecting the country, disrespecting veterans, when literally that wasn't the case. He was just literally standing up for and bringing awareness to the brutal killings caught on camera, to your point, of black and brown people.
Mm-hmm. And it's crazy because you would think as Americans, if we all saw our police officers killing people, shooting people in the back, choking people out on your streets, everybody should feel some type of way about that.
Everybody should. And you know what's funny? I had a friend of mine one time ask me, a white dude, in the midst of this, when it was still fresh and early, he's like, yo, what do you, and mind you, I consider him an ally and I consider him a friend, and I don't think he has any ill intention, but it just goes to show kind of, I guess, the disconnect, and what black people feel versus white people. And he said, what do you think about Colin Kaepernick taking a knee? And I immediately came to his defense. And he probably at this time taken a knee once or twice. And I'm like, yo, I love it, man. The reason why he's taking a knee is because people are being killed in the street. Babies are being killed in the street by the police, the people that are supposed to protect us. And he's drawing awareness to it. And he's saying, I'm not standing for this. So he's taking a stance by, silently protesting and taking a knee. And, his kind of thoughts on it, my friend's kind of thoughts on it were like, I don't know. He's like, I get all that, but he's like, I think maybe he might be doing it for attention because maybe his career is going the other direction. And I immediately took offense to that because I'm like, I don't care if he has selfish intentions. The mere fact that he's bringing an awareness to this issue is enough for me. And I'm going to support him in that.
Right.
But the fact that his brain was even able to go to that I felt some type of way.
Yeah, there's definitely a disconnect when it comes to black and white relations on this issue. I've also had a lot of allies that I have conversations with, and they'd have a similar sentiment. And, for me, when I seen it, I'm like, oh, that's a no-brainer. Like, I'm going to support him.
Right.
Like, it's a no-brainer. Like, I don't even know why people would, second guess it. But, when the narrative gets put out there that he's disrespecting the flag, disrespecting the military, that gets a lot of people who could probably care less about black people and black issues would see that and say, well, he's a black person trying to take away from the country, take away from the flag, take away from the military. So he's no good for us. So let's demonize him.
Right.
And that's just a backwards way of thinking, because on the opposite end, if you saw somebody that looked like you being constantly gunned down in the street by the hands of people who are supposed to protect and serve you, you would also take up and fight that. Nobody in their right mind would just allow that to happen.
And he was one of, I would say, obviously, Muhammad Ali was one of the first, right? But he was one of the first in modern day to make such a public and consistent stance, and put it all on the line. And for the people that say, I think he's just trying to garner attention because his career is going the wrong direction, you don't think he thought that doing this was only going to make it worse?
Of course he did.
Like, he didn't think, oh, I'm going to take a knee and stand up for
everybody's going to love
my community, me. Everyone's going to love me, and I'm going to get drafted. He knew he was putting his career on the line, similar to Muhammad Ali. He knew he was taking a stance that could severely affect his livelihood. But similar to Muhammad Ali, he said, what's more important to me, my career and football, or putting a light on the fact that people that look like me, people that look like my children, my cousins, my nephews, are getting killed by the hands of the police and the people that protect us. And I really appreciate it because he was one of the first celebrities and people with that reach. We go back to reach and influence that took a stance and that could garner the attention of the world. So it goes back to, you know, celebrities being role models, and he's someone that used his influence and his reach and his celebrity and notoriety for good.
Definitely.
So salute Muhammad Ali, the greatest. Salute Colin Kaepernick. We riding with you, my brother.
And for Colin Kaepernick, you may never touch the football field again, but you've touched all our hearts, and you will forever be remembered as a cultural hero.
You're a cultural hero, my guy.
Salute to Cap.
Salute.